I am in my 19th year of teaching middle school, specifically 8th grade. And it's given me a unique perspective on transition. See, these 8th graders are excited about high school, as you can imagine, but they're also scared. They are unsure of what's coming up. And even more so, they're afraid that they won't be able to handle it. And it's interesting, I watch the adults in their lives, smile at their naivete for believing that they can control every aspect of their lives as we give them advice and reassurances that they'll be okay. But what's so funny about it is those same adults that are reassuring the kids, well, we have the same fears in our own lives. Because let's face it, change, especially in times of major transition, well, it's hard for all of us, whether we are 13 or 30. There are 5 main reasons that we tend to be afraid of the future. First of all, well, we don't know what's coming. And it's really scary when the future is this long, dark tunnel and we're unsure what's around the next corner. So take a lesson from what we do with kids. Think about how we prep them before a scary doctor's appointment or their first time through a haunted house. We walk them through what they might expect to happen. We talk about what might be challenging, and we also give them ideas on how to overcome it. You don't need to have a crystal ball into your own future in order to give yourself some of these same reassurances. It's one of those where just a little bit of effort, planning and anticipating and thinking through what might happen and what you could do can often go a long way to settling those fears. Another reason that we fear the future is that we are unsure if we'll be able to handle it. Life has this way of throwing a 200-pound barbell in our laps while we're still struggling to pick up the 20-pound dumbbells. And that's part of the problem, is that we are looking at tomorrow's challenges with the skills and the strengths that we have today. And we neglect to appreciate and understand and recognize that who we are now isn't who we are going to be, that we're going to have skills and knowledge and strength that we don't have today. So maybe you're not strong enough today to handle it, and that's okay. You don't need to know exactly what you're going to do when those hard things do happen. But have trust in your ability, have trust in the nature of progressive resistance, that if you start with those 20-pound dumbbells, that the next week you can handle 22 pounds and then 25. And that before you know it, that 200-pound barbell that life dropped in your lap, you'll be able to pick that up as well. We also have a tendency to fear that the future won't be as good as the past. And some of that is because of how we naturally look at our pasts. We tend to look at it with rose-colored glasses. I like to look at it this way. We have those memories stored away, and we take them out every so often, and we sort of, roll them over in our hands. And what happens is that in time, much like a stone, as they become polished, and any of that grit that was once there, any of those rough edges, well, it's become smoothed away. And we tend to remember the good things, and we tend to forget not the terrible things, but those normal everyday disappointments and rough edges. We discard them over time. And so we tend to see the past as better than it was. And at the same time, we have this tendency to see the future as worse than it is. You know, I think sometimes we see it as different, and we see different as always bad, but it's not. Different is simply different. You know, it's only good or bad if we tell ourselves that it is. We also fear the future because we know that change inevitably means losing some of what we have. And we fear loss. We are all programmed to fear loss more than we anticipate potential gains. Loss is scary. We know it's painful, and so we want to avoid it. And so sometimes we think that if we resist change, if we just stick with the status quo, that somehow we won't lose things, that somehow change won't happen. But the thing is even if you don't change, even if you make no decisions, everything around you is still going to change. Because that's the nature of life. Some things, some people are going to come into your life, and others are going to leave. And if you think about it, that's just as natural as breathing, isn't it? Finally, we fear the future because we can't control it. And it's true, we can't. We can't steer our lives in the direction that we want with confidence that everything that we plan will come to fruition. So you can't control the future, but what you can do is control how much control you give the future over you today. How much space are you allowing this fear to have in your life? How much of your present moment are you giving over to this fear of the future? So this topic is near and dear to me right now. I am in the confidence building and clarity seeking early stages of making a major life transition. And it's scary. I'm not going to lie about that. It's one of those where my fears have been dictating my decisions for far too long. And it's time for me to take charge. And for me to tell those fears that it's time for them to let go. So one of the things that I did this morning that I want to share with you is I did a journaling exercise where I really, for the first time, got those fears out of that dark space where they tend to hide and whisper, and challenged them one at a time. So what I did is I started just by writing down what the fears were. And I put this in their voice. You know, it was basically what they tell me, you know, you're never going to be successful. You know, think of something like that. And simply just writing those fears out, just getting them on paper in the light of day, it already helped to remove some of their power. They no longer seemed quite so formidable. But I didn't stop there. The next thing I did is I took a few moments with each fear and I explored the worst case scenario. You know, I allowed my brain to go down that wormhole of, you know, what if this happened and then this and then, you know, down into that black pit, the absolute worst case. But again, I didn't stop there. Then what I did is I considered that worst case. I imagined myself in that situation for each of my fears. And then I said, okay, if I'm in that place, what agency do I still have? What decisions could I still make? And I wrote those down. And by doing that, that worst case no longer seemed quite so bad. It seemed like something that I could handle if I had to. But then what I did is I challenged the root of the fears. Because you see, I know that these fears are lying to me. I know that it's not reality. So then I sought evidence in my life, past or present, to counteract each of those fears. You know, if the fear was saying A, I would find a piece of evidence that showed me that A wasn't real, that wasn't fact. And then finally, I did one last thing. I thought about a time for each of those fears, for each of those anxieties, that I'd faced something similar in the past and had come out the other side. And I reflected both on how I felt before I took that leap and then how I felt after. And I realized that that fear prior to the leap, well, that was pretty universal. And that after, well, it was rarely as bad or as scary as I had made it out to be. And that once I had conquered it, that feeling, that was priceless.